What is up everyone, and welcome back to another video. So as you probably know, trying to improve at Fortnite is a pretty long process, and oftentimes it can feel like you're not improving or you still suck at the game despite your best efforts to get better. And that's why in today's video I'll be explaining all the reasons that might cause you to still suck at Fortnite, as well as how you can fix them and speed up your improvement. Before we get into it though, be sure to drop a like on the video if it helps you out, and consider subscribing as well if you want to see more content just like this in the future. And as well as that, consider using code Teckoh in the Fortnite item shop, as it's 100% free for you and it really helps your boy out a ton. But with that said, and without further ado, let's get into today's video. So getting into our first common mistake that can cause you to not improve in Fortnite, and that's actually going to be a lack of practice. In Fortnite, practicing for a reasonable amount of time is pretty much a given. We all know that somebody playing 6 hours a day is going to improve way faster than someone playing 1 or 2. But aside from actually spending more time in the game, the other factor to consider is the actual makeup of your playtime, and that's where most players actually fall short. The truth is, you can play Fortnite for 8 hours every day for a ton of months and still be a pretty mediocre player at the end of it if you approach it through the lens of messing around rather than actually trying to improve. So the big question to ask yourself here is, how efficient is your time in game? If you spend 4 hours online on a given day, are you actually spending that time doing productive things like mechanics maps, aim training, arena, and other things like that? Or are you just pub stomping, messing around in creative, or getting sidetracked with other stuff? And of course, there is the pure time factor that I mentioned at the beginning as well. The truth is that while you can improve with 1 or 2 hours per day a couple times a week, you're definitely not going to be reaching your full potential or anywhere even close to it. Time spent in game is a super powerful factor, and I tend to find that around 4 hours of gameplay at least 4 to 5 times a week is a pretty solid way of doing things. So overall, try to consider the amount of time you spend in game as well as how efficient your time played actually is. It's perfectly fine to have some fun when you want to, but if your goal is solely to improve, then you should definitely be cautious about how you're actually spending your time. Moving on from that though, and the next thing I'm going to discuss is balance, specifically the lack of balance that many players have in their practice. As you may or may not know, creative and real matches are super intertwined when it comes to practice. Too little of the real game and you'll have great mechanics but get shaky and nervous and you're going to lack game sense. On the other hand, you do too much creative and you'll have great strategy and game knowledge, but you won't have the mechanics to back it up. Whichever side you may be on, it's super important that you maintain a balance of creative practice in real matches, particularly arena. That way you can improve all of your skills rather than only honing in on certain ones and neglecting others. This balance comes in all different forms for different players. While most of the time you'll be spending more time in real games compared to creative, if you do find yourself struggling mechanically, then you could try something like a 50-50 split, where you basically grind your mechanics and creative for half of your practice and play for the other half. And as you progress in game and your mechanics get super proficient, you're going to want to slowly ease into more and more real games rather than creative. From what I've seen and heard, it seems like most pro players typically do creative for about 20% of their practice. And while that's probably not the best move for most of you watching, something like 40% creative and 60% real games or anywhere around there is a healthy balance for a typical player, at least someone who wants to improve both their mechanics and game sense. So if you find yourself spending too much time in one of the two and neglecting the other, then definitely give the balance factor some consideration. Moving on to our third potential setback in today's video though, and this one is going to be a lack of challenging practice. If you're trying to improve a skill pretty much in any point in life, then you first need to actually struggle with it and have a bit of conflict. That's basically what forces our brains to learn and adapt to new skills, and doing the same easy stuff over and over again will only bring you so far. A lot of players tend to hop into the game and do the same old things that they're comfortable with. Those might include the same old creative maps, pub stomping when they should be playing arena, or playing against friends they can easily beat instead of players who actually challenge them. If you find yourself resorting to the same things that don't challenge you, then amping it up a bit and doing things that you struggle with can really open up new doors in terms of improvement. That could mean finding new 1v1 partners in scrim discords, playing more arena and tournaments, finding new techniques to practice, and even things like VOD viewing that require you to look back at your mistakes and learn from them. But overall, finding different ways to challenge yourself and always work towards something will be incredibly helpful if you're trying to improve quickly. Moving on to the next part of today's video, and instead of the practice related things that we've been going over for most of the video, we're now going to go ahead and shift gears and discuss your setup and settings. The reason I placed these two in the same section is because they really go hand in hand. When it comes to your setup, the list is pretty clear. Good peripherals like a good mouse and keyboard or controller, headset, microphone, etc. As well as that, a high quality monitor, a PC or console that can push out high FPS, an Ethernet cable, and so on. Most of these things are paid for with money, which might make some of them pretty difficult for certain people, but it's really hard to deny that your setup plays a huge role, and if you're playing on an old console with a regular controller on a TV screen, then your improvement is obviously going to be very limited, and it's going to be miles behind someone on a PC playing on like 144 or 240 Hz with top of the line equipment. So if you consider your own setup and find that it may be holding you back, then adjusting that is definitely a viable option. I know it can be quite expensive, but depending on how serious you take the game, it's something to consider. And when it comes to your settings, this is a much more complex issue because it depends on your own preference. But if you do find that your settings aren't working well, you find certain buttons awkward to hit, miss a lot of shots, etc., then some setting adjustments could definitely be in the cards. I don't want to go too in depth on settings for the sake of time, but if you do want to look more into your settings, I'd recommend you check out some of my other videos, as I have a ton of other videos relating to settings. For example, you can see a couple of them on screen right now. It's a bit of a process, but improving your settings is pretty much a surefire way to improve at the game, so I definitely recommend you look into it. Moving on from that though, and my next point is going to be confidence. Specifically, I want to talk about how a lack of confidence can cause even a great mechanical player to become pretty mediocre at the game. In Fortnite, being confident is literally everything. If you push fights super slowly, you second guess yourself, and you get nervous quickly, you're pretty much inevitably going to lose solely due to your mentality. Especially in competitive Fortnite, confidence is one of the most underrated factors, and building a high level of confidence can have even more of an impact than simply improving at the game. So the big question we have to ask here is, how can you actually become more confident in Fortnite and stop being nervous? The first and most obvious solution is simply to get used to it and put yourself into those situations constantly. For example, if you get nervous in solo fights, then push into more solo fights. Sure, you'll continue to get nervous for a while, but you certainly won't get as nervous when you've already been in that situation 1,000 times before. And the other solution that seems to work surprisingly well is simply to fake it until you make it. In Fortnite, your opponent really doesn't know that you're nervous unless you show them by hiding, boxing up, or playing passive. In fact, most of the time your opponent is probably just as nervous, if not more nervous than you are. Even if you're nervous and you think your opponent's going to be good, playing confident in your fights and forcing yourself to be assertive even when it's uncomfortable is a very, very effective way to build that confidence up. Once you do this enough times, you're going to begin to get a grip of where your skill level is actually at, and your pretend confidence will slowly morph into actual confidence until you no longer have to fake it. Overall though, confidence is a super massive factor when it comes to getting good at Fortnite, and lacking confidence can have an enormous impact on your actual performance in game. So if you find yourself sucking at Fortnite despite your best efforts, try to build that confidence up and you'll be surprised by how much you can improve based on that alone. Getting into the last part of today's video though, and the last factor that's probably holding you back from improving at your best pace in Fortnite is the lack of VOD review. This is a topic I bring up in a ton of videos, and I do it because VOD viewing is such a powerful tool for improvement that beginner to intermediate players rarely take advantage of. By hopping into an arena game or something of the sort, playing it out like normal, and then VOD viewing the games where you struggle, you're going to be able to spot the exact areas of your gameplay where you struggle and then devise an actual plan to improve on those issues. Targeting your weaknesses is a critical part of improving at the game. As you've probably heard before, a chain is only as strong as its weakest link, so finding the areas where you struggle with through a VOD review will give you a much clearer view of what you actually need to do. What I recommend you do is hop into either an arena game or a tournament if one is running, and then just play out a couple of games straight just like you normally would. You can either record the games or simply have the replay file, which is a much better option for most players who can do it. From there, watch the recording or jump into replay mode and watch all of your fights, rotations, etc. Take notes of what you do right and wrong, and then reflect on what the actual patterns were. Most of the time, you're going to find a couple of patterns in your gameplay that cause you to lose, and then you can specifically target those weak areas to maximize your improvement. And on the other hand, you can also look at the things you're good at and reflect on how you can implement them even better to make your strong points even stronger. Overall though, VOD reviewing is an absolutely fundamental piece for virtually every high-level competitive player, and I think that players who are struggling to improve can also make fantastic use of it, so definitely give it a try. But with all that said guys, that's going to wrap it up for today's video on why you still suck at Fortnite and the various factors that may be holding you back from improving. Overall, by fixing the various mistakes and factors I discussed in this video, you should be well on your way to improving at the game much faster. If you found this video helpful, then be sure to drop a like on it, and consider subscribing as well if you want to see more content just like this in the future. As well as that, consider using code Teckoh in the item shop, as it's 100% free and it really helps your boy out a ton. But with that said, thank you all for watching this video, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye for now.